within us, because we've never really had a good idea of that. It's absolutely fascinating, and I'm going to share a lot of different stories with you as we go. This is going to be a 3-week series. So today we're going to talk in general terms, talk about educating you on the awareness of the different parts, what kind of organisms we have. And then I kind of want you to think about, some things as the week progresses that, the following week you can come back and maybe have some observations. What I've learned is that, first of all, a little background on me. I was an industrial engineer at an early age, and then I became a stockbroker for 29 years, and I dealt with microcap stocks, doing all my own analysis and research in those companies. And that's how I learned how to do a lot of research. I was gifted with photographic memory, so it makes it very easy for me to be able to do that. And I have the discipline to read the documents. And it excites me to have the knowledge, because that reduces fear, especially when you're in the stock market. So now I switched careers. I found that was really purposeless for my time here on the planet. And I really enjoy observing what nature is doing and how we are just part of nature, but we've really gotten off the track of that. And just as I've learned how to grow things and having the right microbes in the soil and the relationship, there's no difference between that and the relationship that we have with the microbes that are in and on us. And as we start to understand this with an awareness, we can change the whole physical, mental experience as a human being. And I'll explain more about that. There's science behind this. This isn't voodoo or something that's made up. There's books that are being written on this. I've read many books. This is one of the better books. And in the back are just pages and pages of studies that have been done that reference to all of these different studies, so that we understand more of how this nature, how we're part of nature, and how nature can work with us with knowledge about what's happening in our ecosystem within us. So what I'd like to do next is I'm going to go to a slide presentation, and we're going to talk about the physical aspect of what this tube, I call it a tube that actually goes through us, because it's when we put something inside our mouth, it never enters our body. It goes through a tube that goes directly through us. And this tube is what we're going to analyze and understand more about. So let's switch to the presentation. Okay. Just a little technical difficulty. We'll get it in a second. There we go. Okay, so human digestive system. When something comes into our mouth, it then goes down this esophagus, which is this tube that leads to the stomach, which is really, think of it as a cleansing system. It's an acid bath to get rid of any microbes that might be contaminating any of the things that we put through our tube. And then once it drops down through that stomach, it goes into the small intestine, which is in the center diagram there. And that is 27 feet long. So what happens is when food comes down or something enters the esophagus, it drops into this acid bath where it's cleansed. And then it drops into this small intestine that's 27 feet long. And the way it's described is that when it first comes in there, it's very acidic, and it's like coming into a river, like the Niagara River before the falls. It would be very fast and very, fast moving, and there's not a lot of slowdown there, and there's not a lot of activity in there. And as it keeps going through that 27 feet, it slows down, becomes less acidic, becomes more occupied with different bacteria and different organisms. However, the real absorption that happens there is with foods that are refined. So as we take foods and we make them refined, they no longer have to be broken down, so they're very easily absorbable, and that's what happens in the small intestine. Not a lot of bacterial influence. And then from there, we drop down into the large intestine, which is approximately 6 feet long. And that is really where the action is. And this is the most integral part of the autoimmune system, the system that we use to stay healthy, that our body is able to recognize enemies and get rid of them. So here, this kind of talks about the fact that in the stomach, there's very few bacteria, only 10 to the second to 10 to the third in numbers, and then it increases. But and these are the different species on the left. And let me break that down simpler. I broke it down here. So here's what you have. In the stomach, you have very few organisms. I mean, not too much can live in acid. Actually, it is quite surprising because microbes can pretty much exist in almost any environment. Some of the harshest environments you could think of, there are microbes that have adapted and live in. They've been here long before us, and they'll be here long after we're gone. They're absolutely amazing in their adaptability and the number of species. We go to the small intestine, and there's between 100,000 to 100 million. So still a lot more, but not that much compared to the large intestine. Now remember, the small intestine is 27 feet. Large intestine is only 1/3 of that, and it has between 10 billion and 10 trillion microbes in that area. And the species are between 1,000 and 2,000 species. The more species they're finding that we have in our large intestine in particular, the more diverse they are, the healthier the human body is, because these microorganisms play an intricate role, just like they do in the ground when I'm growing plants. They play an intricate role in providing the nutrition for the plant, just like when we throw food down the tube and it gets to these microbes, they're breaking it down so that the nutrients can come into the human body. However, if we don't have mindfulness as to who we're feeding and what we're feeding them, we could be feeding the wrong species and have overgrowths that can cause a term that you'll hear a lot called dysbiosis. Biosis or symbiosis is when everything is in balance and working beautifully. Dysbiosis is when things just aren't working. The system is not sustainable. It's not working. Everything is kind of in disarray. And these organisms are really amazing. There's bacteria and fungi and protists. And then we hear about viruses. So we hear about the COVID virus. And all of a sudden, we put our alarms up and think, well, viruses, they got to be all bad. Well, 99.9%, 99.99% of viruses are actually hugely beneficial, and we could not exist as a human being without these. Think of these viruses as being information sensors. So almost like little CD discs or compact discs with information on them. And they float around because their knowledge about the environment. And when they come into the human body, they tell the human body how to adapt to what's happening in the environment. And viruses are an integral part of our existence, and we couldn't exist without them. It's just when one of them has bad programming, like a bad virus you would find on the internet, it comes in and it programs and takes over cell control in a bad way. And that's where the rest of the body then has to take care of it. But viruses are a very important part, and we could not exist without them because our body is constantly adapting, and they're the ones that bring the knowledge to us. So when we talk about some of these cells in the human body, this particular cell is so complex. It's got all types of different particles in there. And these are one of 10 billion or 100 billion that we're seeing in out there. Can everybody see the slides okay?
Yep.
Okay. So these are the different bacterias that what I call some of the best. And if you want to come here, you can watch off this screen. So Lactobacillus, Bifidobacteria, and Saccharomyces boulardii. And these are the kinds, these are some of the best bacteria that we want to have in our ecosystems in our body. The last one, Saccharomyces boulardii, is really an interesting one because this bacteria is so cool. It's actually a yeast, and what it does is when we bring it into the human tube and it gets into the small intestine, it tends to muscle out some of the invading species that shouldn't be in that tube. What happens in our society is that if we're not treating the bacteria that are supposed to be in the large intestine, and we're just bringing a lot of refined foods in, eventually bacteria that shouldn't be in the small intestine come up there. And we need to get them out of there if we want to have symbiosis again in the system. And that's where Saccharomyces boulardii can come in, because you could take this bacteria, and we'll teach you how in probably the third class. You ferment it with fresh fruits, and then you take that and you put it into your body on a daily basis for a period of time. And it's just like working with anything in nature. Eventually it will start to change what's happening there, and it'll start to transform that environment to a more beneficial for the individual. So people that might have a candida, which is a very, very powerful bacteria. What candida does is everything in balance is okay, but candida, they love getting refined sugars, refined flours, so they love their bagel. Matter of fact, when they're fed, they produce a chemical which is very soothing to the brain, that the brain feels. But when the brain doesn't get that, the brain goes through withdrawal, almost as if it was an opiate withdrawal. So the role that these microbes play is that candida is so influential in the host, which is the human body, that what it's going to do is it's going to ensure that the human host will feed it by producing a chemical that if it's not fed, it won't produce that chemical. And then the human body, so the individual who says they're not going to have a bagel that day is driving down the road, and they're feeling upset at the car in front of them. It's not going fast enough. Everything is going wrong until they make a decision to finally get that bagel. And at that point, there's a relief, because the bacteria are so intelligent that once the human host has made that decision, they're aware it's going to happen, and they start producing it because they know they're going to be fed, and they'll be ready for the population increase because the food will be coming. That's how intelligent nature is. And that's how, if we're aware of it, we can work with nature to understand what's really going on. And where do these ideas of food come from anyway? You know, do they just come out of thin air? No, they have to come from somewhere. It's coming from the organisms that we're actually feeding when we put food through there. We think we're feeding the human body and the ego that we have. Those ideas are coming much deeper. So this is what happens, is that when we have dysbiosis, these gut linings, this is what the small intestine looks like here. It's this amazing tube that has all of these. The next slide, the next center shows that these tubes stick up, and they have all of these connecting tissue here. And that's where the exchange is between the food and the human body, where the blue and the red, blood cells are. And the celiac damage, you could see that these aren't healthy. The bottom one is very healthy, where they're healthy, they're sticking up, they're just looking vibrant. And this is what happens, is that on the left, we have a normal tight junction, because whether it be in the small intestine or the large intestine, there's only one cell thick. and they're supposed to be very tight together and very healthy and keep everything from not getting through to the bottom side, which is the blood side of the human body. But on the right, you could see that if that gut wall isn't being treated properly, food particles, microbes can get down and they get close to that blood side there. And that's where our immune system is. So when that happens, here's what's going on a closer look, penetrating, getting down. Now it's getting into the blood. You got microbes getting into the blood. The microbes go into our blood system. They live in our bodies. They're supposed to stay in the gut. So here's an example. So the bottom where these cells are called dendritic cells, those are your immune system. Above that, all those little villi, all those little peripheral bumps there, that's the exchange unit between us. And if those are healthy, then the dendritic cell sticks its little antenna up and it sees that everything is good. And now it does an anti-inflammatory cell because your body is in beautiful shape. But if there's nothing there but food particles and bacteria real close to that lining, it's going to start to produce killer T cells and the immune system will be activated and the body can't go into a repair mode because it's got to go into an attack mode because its food tube is being invaded. It's really not being invaded. It's unhealthy, and that's why it's being invaded. And this is the difference, is that on the left you have a normal, nice bacteria balance, and on the right you have all of these different bacteria that have found their way in there that because we weren't aware. And here's the whole thing. So when you're looking at this, it's so hard because sometimes you know we can be hard on ourselves and we think about the fact that it seems hopeless. Like nature doesn't care. Nature is there to be healthy, to proliferate, to exhume health. And that's what the human body wants to, if we know the operating instructions on the human body. And we're starting to learn that. Part of it is that these microbes play a huge role in both mental and physical health of the human body. And we're learning that on a daily basis. I was listening to another podcast, amazing podcast, talk about dementia. Well, people say that they found that when people have dementia, they find that we end up having, on the end of the neurons, we end up having plaque buildup. And that they feel could be the cause of somebody not being able to remember. So they go ahead and they do more research and they remove the plaque. And what happens is it doesn't help. It actually, dementia gets worse. Then they do more research and they start to look at the microorganisms, and they take the child that happens to die in an accident and they do an autopsy of the brain and they find that it's clean of any microbes. They find a person with Alzheimer's, they open that brain up, and all of a sudden they found that fungi have infiltrated the brain and are living in the brain, and they shouldn't be. And plaque that forms on the neurons is actually antimicrobial. It's the body's defense system to get that microbe the hell out of there because it doesn't belong in there, but it got in there because these things, you know, they'll go anywhere. You know, their life, they want to proliferate. So, you know, we're learning more and more about this, and we're understanding, you know, it's not that complicated. We're just part of nature. We need to understand how nature works. And these are different phases. You know, you want to have more of a normal gut. And how do you get a normal gut? Well, this is a good little video that I want you to watch, and let's see if we can get this to play.
There's no picture.
Oh, okay. No picture? Hold on. Let's stop it. Sorry about that. Okay, let's see, how do we,
I can't believe you could hear me.
okay. Skip the slide, and what I'll do is we'll, how do we get back to the,
Presentation.
Yeah. okay, are we there? What is that? Yeah. Okay, everybody see that screen?
No.
No?
No.
Okay. All right, so we got to,
We're getting subtitled.
there we go.
Oh,
And then share
now we've got
content.
your shop.
Yep, hold on 1 second. Screen? No. Oh. Almost there. Okay. Everybody see that now?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
great.
back at the beginning though. It's
Yeah.
slide 1.
All right, and now it's moving?
No,
Yes.
No.
yes, yes, yes.
Okay. All right, so at any rate, that video, what that video wanted to explain, and I will explain it verbally for you, is that, matter of fact, let me do it here. Yeah. So what happens is when we go ahead and we eat fiber in particular, it comes down, goes through our small intestine, nothing touches it, drops into the large intestine. Our first set of bacteria come in, break that down, release all these nutrients and all of this energy, and then they go to sleep. A second set of bacteria wake up, they come in, they take the broken down particles, break it down even further, producing more food for a third set of bacteria. They go to sleep, and this third set, they wake up, they break down the final product and produce this short chain fatty acid called butyrate. And butyrate is the purest energy form for cells in the human body. The only way that we can produce that is by having our body get enough fiber and having the right set of microbes working like an army within us to constantly be producing this stuff. And when they do that, it builds up on the gut wall and it ends up looking like a cloud. It's actually mucus. It's like manna from heaven for the microbes. And when we don't feed them, they can nourish themselves on this and feed on it. So they're still producing the neurochemicals needed for mental and physical balance, because they're producing anti-inflammatories, they're producing neurological chemicals to soothe the brain, to calm anxiety, to reduce stress. That's the role they play. They also play a very important role when we put all of this butyrate on that gut wall. When a cancer cell does form, which is a negative trait that a DNA starts to replicate on, there is a built-in program with all cells to self-terminate. It's called autophagy. What happens is butyrate causes autophagy to open up and start to begin. And that's important. There's other triggers for autophagy like fasting. What fasting does, intermittent fasting, is it allows your microbes to do their job and they're not getting crowded with, fighting other microbe families, or, it's nice to reset the colonies. That's what fasting does. All right, let me get back to this. Right there. Okay. All right, so let me get back to the spot. So that was what the video was about. And I can always put a link up for that. So probiotics versus prebiotics, we hear a lot of different things. So what a probiotic is something that is alive. It's a living thing. A prebiotic is before it's alive. It's the food that you need to feed things. So prebiotics is what we want to be eating to be able to feed the microbes in our gut. Probiotics are when we want to add microbes to our gut environment. And there's a way we can even do this in a more prolific way. So when you see yogurt there on the right, we're going to learn how to do yogurt where instead of just fermenting it for 4 to 6 hours and getting the colony sizes maybe up to 100 million, we're going to take it for 30 hours so that a half a cup would have 10 billion colony forming units, because that's how we can then have an immediate impact on the gut and start to change the environment that we have. And then this is really something that we don't think about, but we have this amazing living system within us. And in this living system, the stuff that we put in our body is going to have an amazing negative or positive effect on these colonies. So alcohols and sugars, stress. Stress is amazing because when someone is stressed, it ends up that we produce cortisol. As soon as cortisol is produced when we get stressed, it's immediately in the blood. The microbes pick up on the cortisol, and they can immediately, the pathogenic and the negative bacteria in our gut know that the human body is under stress, so they can proliferate and cause hell because they know the immune system can't mess with them. Everything else is already in a red zone because it's being stressed out, and cortisone is already being put out there. Over sanitation, chlorine in our water. If we're drinking tap water, tap water has chlorine in it so that no microbes grow in the pipes. Well, we're putting that in our pipe, and that means we're trying to kill off some microbes unknowingly. So we need to be aware of what we're doing. We take antibiotics, and they have a huge effect. Sure, they kill maybe a bad species, but they also kill tons of good species as well. So we need to be aware. Exercise is extremely good for bacteria. All that movement, all that activity, it moves the colonies around. Things are moving. It's a whole world in there. There's more microorganisms in our gut than there are people on the planet. And this is all inside of us, and it's changing all the time. And it's predicated upon what we're putting through the tube as to what results we get out of it. And these are some great things that are all prebiotics that the human body, it'll go through the small intestine, won't be absorbed. Nothing will happen until the microbes get a hold of it, and then they do their job. And that's where the magic happens, in that 6-foot section, which is the area from the small intestine down to the butt. And that's where all of the neurological chemicals, and now, I'll stop sharing here, and then we can also check for questions if you want to, Amanda. So, we're now learning more and more that the role these different species play is so intricate that if people have problems with sleep, there are different probiotics that they've now found help people get a good night's sleep and have a continual night's sleep. And a lot of these bacteria used to be present in our body. There's another one, which is really this amazing bacteria called L. reuteri. And this one is kind of special because it produces a chemical called anandamide, which is a bliss hormone. When we are in love, or we feel empathy, or we're very grateful, that's a neurological chemical that our brain feels, and it causes this effect within our psyche and within our body. And the chemical that is called anandamide. The body can produce it naturally, usually through stimulation with some of the cannabinoids or the endocannabinoid system. but also we can produce it through our microbes. And we used to have this bacteria in all of our genomes, all of our ecosystems. And as soon as we started taking antibiotics about 40, 50 years ago, this thing is non-existent anymore. Yet all the dogs and cats, all the animals have it. And anandamide, so if I have anandamide in my system all the time, it's kind of like having that feeling when you're in love, that when stuff happens, you have a choice between it being a really difficult thing for you or it being okay. Because when you're in love, little things don't bother you because you just have that better feel about things. And it's a choice. And these choices are neurological chemicals, and they're supported by the bacteria that we have in our gut. That's why, I'll show next week, we'll have some different ones we choose from. I have some that are called mood bacteria. They can actually call it mood bacteria because there's been proven studies that people that take this, it improves their mood. And how does that work? Very simply. We got this microorganism inside of us that can produce a neurochemical that we're not capable of producing, or if we do, this is a dual source of it. It absorbs into our system and it hits our brain, and that's how we feel different. We have this amazing nerve called the vagus nerve, and it goes from our mouth, connects to the brain, and goes right down to the butt. And it has about between 1 and 2 million connections through that length. And it's more active than the spinal cord with electrical information flow. 80% of the communication is from the microbes going to the human body. Only 20% are going the other way. What that means is that these are producing a lot more of an effect on the human experience than what we ever knew. And we're just scratching the surface. Like, here's one of the books, Dr. William Davis. This is called Super Gut. An amazing book. And he's a guy who talks about making different yogurts and getting the different colonies. And what else we're going to do is if you think about it, these microbes respond to different antimicrobials and antifungals. So some of the most powerful ones we have at our disposal are oregano oil. And we also have cloves. So cloves have a very powerful effect. Curcumin, which is turmeric, garlic, onions, hot peppers. So not only are these foods that are used for seasoning, but these foods have a role and play a significant role in keeping this community within us in the proper balance. And when you get this thing in a proper balance, then it's what's called symbiosis, and the system is better than what it would be where everybody is giving to the system, and you have health, you have growth, you have life, as opposed to when you have dysbiosis, you don't have life because you have parasitic systems that are draining from the system that are pulling energy out of the system. That's a definition of a parasite. Something that lives within a system that isn't contributing to the system, that's pulling away from the system. And we want a symbiotic relationship where everybody is cooperating, everybody's helping. All these different bacteria are working in unison. We're all working. But we have to know how they operate. So, example is I told you about those 3 different colonies and how they work. Well, if we put food in and the first guys are done and the second colonies wake up and start doing their job, but we put more food in the tube, the first guys have to wake up and do their job and the second guys go back to sleep. So if we're eating at all hours of the day, the second and third guys never get to do their job, and the janitors are the last guys, and they never get to work because breakfast is here and nobody got to do the cleanup and the repairs job. So if we understand that, then we want to make sure that we understand how the digestive system works. So we could just let the body do its whole cycle every day. Everything's clean. That's how nature works. That's how we work. We're part of nature. A couple other great books. Fiber Fuel. Really interesting book. We actually have this one in the cookbook here in the store, or you can get it on Amazon, but it's an amazing book as well. This doctor, he was an amazing doctor that gastrology. He went through all the medical field. He was leader in his class. But he was burned out. He met a beautiful girl who had a different diet. And because of that, he was open to seeing what she was eating. And then he started doing the research behind it. And he realized that fiber is something that we do not talk enough about. It's cheap. Just about 90 to 95% of Americans are deficient in fiber. A woman should be eating 28 grams of fiber a day. A man should be eating 32 grams of fiber a day. Unless they're getting less than 5, if any. If we don't feed these bacteria, then they eat that mucosal wall down, and then we have no immune system. And we have things like peanut allergies, this allergy, that allergy. The body's just doing its job. We just don't understand what we're supposed to be doing. Why don't we check on questions to see if we have any there?
Any questions?
I think if you hit the chat, they would pop up.
I have a question, Tom. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, you briefly mentioned mucus in the intestinal tract, and I didn't catch everything that you said. Also, maybe it's my computer, but your voice is fading in and out a little bit.
Same thing's happening with me.
Oh, it's okay. I didn't know if it was me or not. But anyway, I just wanted to let you know, Tom.
Okay. Good. Was there a question in there?
Yeah,
No.
about the mucus. You mentioned mucus in your intestines, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
And could you elaborate on having too much mucus? Is that healthy or unhealthy? Things like that.
Yeah. So mucus is really the sign of a healthy gut. It's who do we have inhabiting inside of that mucus. So it's really important that, we start to become aware. Most of the issues that I've seen from reading and it's because the mucosal wall isn't there. That mucus is not built up. How do you build mucus? Blueberries are a wonderful aid in doing it. We'll talk about some of the aids to build this mucosal wall. There's quite a few that are listed. I don't have them off the top of my head, but specific things help build that mucus in there. And that is our defense system. The main thing is that this butyrate is responsible for the energy and putting that mucus in there that is high energy for the cells. And the way that has to happen is by having the right bacteria fed on a regular basis and keeping them like an army working for you all the time. One of the things I learned as an engineer early was that if I had a lot of different systems working for me, I could get ahead. So anything that could be working, those are all beneficial to me. When I think about my microbes now, it's like, which guys do I want to have working for me? These guys are part of me. These guys are going to keep me healthy. So when I do that, now all of a sudden, this is how it changes my thinking. So my thinking is, first of all, that I realize that if I eat meat every meal like I did at one time in my life, that feedstock is going to cause a certain colony formation called firmicutes. And firmicutes have certain characteristics, and when they break down that protein and they release the nutrition, they also produce acidity in the human body. They also produce inflammatories on a straight line basis. The more you eat, the more you get. And they also take more energy out of the food, whatever food comes in, because they're also meant during times of let's say, a feast or a kill of an animal. Back in the days when we operated on that basis without stores and food around 24/7, the microbes would grow faster and they could take more energy out of the food and put it into fat because that's what they were meant to do on a survival basis. On the other hand, if I had Bacteroides and neither one of these colonies can be in equal size, one has to dominate and one has to be in recession. And they're always both there, but in different ratios. If I have Bacteroides in bigger colony size, however, and they like 5 and they like veggies and they like all this, this other stuff, my body is alkaline. And all of a sudden my pH is the proper pH, and the environment is a lot more conducive to anti-inflammatory, and I don't have the inflammatories going into my body. So if I know that, and let's say I do want to have a piece of meat, I can still indulge. I don't want to have a huge piece if I choose to, but I want to think it through. Do I want to have that again? Because once I feed them, they're going to increase in population. I feed them again another meal, they're going to go from here to here, and then they're going to go from here to here. Instead, if I fed them once and they go to here, and then I don't feed them, I go back to feeding these guys, and then if I do have something, I feed them. But that balance is a lot healthier, and that's what science is showing is a lot healthier diet. We've never had anybody die of protein deficiency, and I can get a ton of proteins out of beans, and they're cheap and they're organic, and my chances of colon cancer are reduced by 50% by having a serving of beans twice a week in your diet. 50% reduction in colon cancer. My dad died of colon cancer. And that beans a lot. Also had alcohol in the body and worked with chemicals at DuPont. And the way the body works is that when you have a lot of chemicals and you also have alcohol, alcohol takes a priority. The chemicals are stored in fat, and they got to come back out. Double toxicity to the body. No wonder the body dies of cancer, because they can't deal with the toxicity. The whole system's overloaded. So,
There's a question.
yeah,
Thank you.
you're welcome.
What are some simple high fiber foods to introduce, and also what powerful probiotics to help rebuild good gut bacteria?
Yeah, so that's really the key, is that we don't want to just get seeds. If I'm a farmer and I've got a field out there and I see that I can get, everybody's growing wheat, so I just buy a bunch of wheat seed and I just throw it out there without knowing what I got out there, I could be creating more of a problem than I started with. I need to understand where I'm at. And then I need to understand exactly why I'm bringing the species in. So here's an example. The most prescribed or most purchased probiotic on the market also seems to find that people with celiac disease have an overpopulation of that bacteria that is also the highest purchased probiotic. Because when people think about it, they go, oh, I better get a probiotic. And they get whatever's on the shelf. And those are the most common forms of bacteria. They aren't necessarily the strain specific. So if we're going to grow vegetables, if we're going to grow a tomato, let's choose what kind of tomato we want to grow so that we can have the most nutritious tomato in our body, as opposed to having one that's going to grow wild and won't produce a lot of food. So it's important. And that's where the beauty comes in, is that the science is now showing, like L-Reuteri, which can give you anandamide. So we're going to learn how to do that. We're going to take 10 tablets that might have maybe 10 million CFUs, and we're going to grind them up. We're going to add some inulin, which is pure prebiotic food. And then we add some organic half and half, and we put that in for 30 hours at 100 degrees in a bath. And at the end, we end up having, in a half a cup, like 10 billion, colony forming units. And now we're talking about doing a very high grade, and you're in control, and you're doing it because it's really simple to do this stuff. It's fun too. You pick different ones, and you can add different ones and put them into your system. And this is the way our society used to operate. We used to make pickles and ferment things. Now we have technology and science with us. Now we can grow colonies to put inside of us that are different than the ones that are just in nature fermenting things. So, but other prebiotics. So garlic is really a good one. Onions are very good. Asparagus leeks. You get into the lentils, beans, a lot of the nuts. So like walnuts, raw walnuts are great. Mixed nuts, cashews, sunflower seeds, all of the not refined things that need to go through the body. You know, maybe seeds are a little harder sometimes if the gut isn't in real good condition. So lay off of those till you start building the gut up after a while. It's an environment and it's always changing. The cells on the gut wall are replaced every 14 days. Microbes in the gut live on average 20 minutes. So in one 24-hour period, you have 72 lifetimes for some of these microbes. So when you think about the power of how they can multiply and how quickly they can multiply, it's not hard to see how with awareness and understanding, we can go from dysbiosis because of lack of awareness to now making changes and starting to understand and starting to make choices. Big example would be fats. If we take a look at the calorie content of the different foods that we put into the human body, one small spoonful of fat has equivalent of a handful of this or a handful of the grain or a handful. The calorie content is so high, whether it be butter, whether it be oil, whatever form of fat. Well, that means that when we eat foods with those fats, and in most cases, it's not the good fats, it's the bad fats that are coming in. What do I mean by bad fat? Bad fat feeds a lot of colonies, and they're parasitic colonies that don't necessarily reflect health in the human body. It's kind of like having rats that clean up the mess, but they're not nice to have around. And they don't give anything back to the system, and they get overpopulated and they get nasty. Whereas if we had good omega-3 fats in the diet, like fish oils, the avocado oils, and the coconut oils that are healthy for the human body, those feed a different colony that are beneficial to the human body. So we want to be mindful because, you know, if let's say you are going to indulge in a snack, and let's say you want to have potato chips and you just crave them, try to have a healthy fat. They're made with avocado oil, and they're made with a coconut oil, as opposed to a canola oil or a soybean oil or whatever oil they're going to use. Think about it a little bit different. I want to put quality. You know, this human body is your Maserati. If you put the right fuel in it, it can operate that way. But we got to understand the owner's manual, and we're learning that. And it doesn't take a lot. It's a lot simpler than we're making it. We're part of nature. We're not in control of nature. We have this ego and mobility that are probably our biggest detriment. We're part of nature. The same way plants grow in the soil, it's the same way that humans take nutrition into the human body. The same way when plants have an overgrowth of a certain fungi, they can be detrimental to them. Same thing with the human body. We're learning that now. And we have all these organisms, and if we start to understand how they play and the role they play, we can shape it the way we want it. We can have this beautiful garden ecosystem inside of us, as opposed to this haphazard, eat what I want because I don't really understand the repercussions of what I'm eating. Who am I feeding? That's really what the question is. That's, you know, and some of the people that have started to understand this, they said, you know, I'll never look at food the same way. But it shouldn't be looked at because maybe we're not looking at the same meaningful and depth that it could have in our lives, what it does for us. You know, I love putting these bacteria into the human body and then feeling it, you know, being more in touch with my emotions, being, you know, I'm so aware that, you know, I know if I eat something, what the effect is going to be on my body, and it stops me from doing it now because after I eat it, 10 hours later, I can feel it. And that's one of the things I want everybody to do over the next week is start to become aware of your feelings and even take a note. Like, you know, if you're feeling down a little bit, think about what you ate a couple hours before and see if the two correlate. Because a lot of times when we eat something, it produces something called TMAO, which is this chemical that can cause negative feelings, negative thoughts, because it puts the body under some stress to deal with it. It's in a lot of the junk food, you know, like your quick breakfast sandwiches and your bagels and things. So see if there's a correlation so that you can start to understand how the system works. You know, I had some chips with some avocado oil in them, and I realized that all that salt, you know, my body was dry. That's how aware I am that that consumes more water, and all of a sudden the system doesn't have the amount of water. Water is another key, and I can't emphasize enough about water. I highly suggest getting a reverse osmosis water filter, which takes 99.9% of everything out of it. Or another one is a Berkey, which actually is a stainless steel canister that drops the water through filters. Both take a lot of this fluoride and chlorine out. You want to have pure water going into the huge vessel. It's your body, you know, and a lot of times we'll get these plastic bottles and think we're helping ourselves, but there's also chemicals released from the plastic. So, you know, you have good water at home. I got a good glass mug, and I love drinking water, and making teas with water, and cooking with clean water, and all of that is so important to us. Questions?
No more questions here.
Do you remineralize your water? Or I've heard that osmosized water can draw nutrients from you, like metals and.
Yeah. So the question is, you know, do I remineralize my water? I don't. I use a lot of like Celtic salt or Himalayan salt. I have, and I do get blood tests once in a while to see if I have any deficiencies.
So your cooking has those back end that might have otherwise maybe sucked out or whatever.
Yeah, I find that, you know, not a problem. Yeah, you know, the main thing is get clean water, and distilled water, that's different. I wouldn't use distilled water. It can draw some of the minerals out of the body, is my understanding. But reverse osmosis, I haven't remineralized any of my water. I do use like Celtic salts, and you know, I like to get some minerals that way. And also I do a lot of mineral dense vegetables, a lot of greens and beans and things like that. Good.
Tom, are you there? Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Go ahead, Tom. We started talking about the vagus nerve. Not tonight, but in sometime in the future, maybe we could get a little bit more inclusive about the vagus nerve. It's really an important topic. What do you think about that for a future broadcast? I am unmuting.
Yeah, the vagus nerve is really an amazing nerve that we're really just learning about. And there's actually ways to stimulate it. And I actually have been doing, just in the last week or two, I've been researching some of the ways to stimulate the vagus nerve. Because it is that link between the microbes and the brain. It's a communication link. So to give you an idea, when you do put something in your mouth, the microbes that are present in your mouth are transmitting data that's going through the skin of your mouth, finding its way all the way down to the colonies and letting them know what's happening down in the environment in the large intestine. And this vagus nerve is that communication link between all of these microbes. It's like the microbe internet. And then we have the spinal cord, which is like the electrical system of the interface of mechanical to electrical, muscle to electrical movement. And the two, they're finding, you know, the vagus is more involved with the gut to the brain axis. And the gut is now really considered to be the living brain. There's not a doubt in my mind that first as humans, we know very little. And it doesn't matter what we know. The fact of the matter is that these microbes act in profound ways we don't even understand. I mean, to have two colonies sitting side by side that are antagonistic, and they won't attack each other until they get to a proper population size called quorum population. And then they light up and they act like one and they move into action. It's a form of intelligence that's decentralized intelligence that we don't understand, we don't comprehend. You know, fungi are the same way. They have decentralized intelligence and their digestive system is external, ours is internal. We're just part of nature, and we think we're so different. We're not. You know, the more we understand this and drop our defenses to accepting that, you know, the healthier we can be, the happier we can be. Is what I'm finding. You know,
That sounded
Dopamine.
pretty good, Tom.
what's that?
I said that
Sounds-
sounded pretty good. I've been doing vagus nerve studies probably for the past 5 to 10 years. And I'm not even close. So maybe we can find somebody that you can bring on to help us with that. Going over to probiotics. There's a couple of probiotics that I have been looking at for probably over 20 years. One of them 25 years. One called Lactobacillus GG. It's currently branded under Culturelle. I think it's pretty good. It seems to be the main source of Lactobacillus GG. It's a human lactobacillus. The other one is Reuteri, and that was developed from a Peruvian breast milk. Do you know anything else about that besides me?
Yeah, L-Reuteri is the one that produces the anandamide that gets wiped out with any antibiotic that we take. So L-Reuteri is the one, like a lot of the yogurts that I'm making, that's one of the base ones that I use. Because L-Reuteri is what we wiped out. And then the other one that's used a lot, now L-Reuteri is used, I use that usually in a culture of either coconut milk or dairy product to formate a yogurt. Whereas a Saccharomyces boulardii, we would use fruit to do that because they like more of a sugar base and they're a different species. But yeah, L-Reuteri, that's the one that produces anandamide, which, you know, I think everybody should be getting that and everybody should learn how to get that. And especially children, because you know, they need a lot of help with, I mean, all of our, what I observe from my point of being around people that are coming into my store looking for ways to become healthier is that, you know, what we've done to the next generation is that we've wiped out all of the colonies that support a lot of the balance that they need, both mentally and physically, you know, and these diseases like Hashimoto's and autoimmune. I mean, my two sons both have Hashimoto's disease or had Hashimoto's. Luckily, you know, we were diagnosed and then I've researched it. And that was an impetus for a lot of my research, was to understand more. I had an autoimmune from salmonella poisoning. We're seeing this more and more and more. And it's because we have a delicate ecosystem within us that we became less and less aware of through lack of knowledge and our food system, putting more chemicals in there, more chemicals in our diets and everything. And it changes. And now the effect of that is we're seeing it in, you know, in things like Alzheimer's and all these diseases that when I was young, we didn't have them. Peanut allergies. I mean, when I was growing up, never had that stuff, but we ate a lot different. We had different colonies and we didn't have all these antibiotics, but you know, so it's sad. And that's why I'm so excited about the fact that now that this is out there, if we start to teach people how to do this, we can help everybody get control of their own health, which is just having your own garden inside of yourself and being able to visualize it by the foods that you're eating, what you can do. And it's all part of the process. And that's natural and it feels good and you're in control. Yeah.
What do you think the role of like Roundup and non-organic industrial chemical farming plays in damaging the gut bacteria and stuff like that? Is that is it important to try to limit any exposure to that as much as possible?
Yeah, glyphosate is probably the worst chemical that ever was put on the planet, especially in the amount. For every man, woman, and child, there's 2.2 pounds, and this is probably 2 years old data. There's 2.2 pounds for every man, woman, and child in the United States being put on the food to either feed the humans or the animals that feed the humans. And this is probably one of the worst chemicals that you could ever want to have. It would have a skull and crossbones all over it if you had it without knowing that there was a function for it. The function that they do, and by the way, it was patented to be used as an antibiotic, but when they did the tests on the human genome, it killed the good bacteria and let the bad ones like E. coli proliferate. So it had a negative effect. So the term antibiotic means it kills a certain groups, and it's a bad antibiotic. It kills all the good guys and lets the bad guys go. In the soil, it just kills everything. Pretty much the whole biology in the soil is killed. The plants then have to go to a chemical uptake system. So if any bacteria were to come back that normally go ahead and produce nitrogen, they're not needed because the system is being circumvented around them. The soil is basically dead, and weeds. What Roundup does is when it gets absorbed by the plant, it shuts off their nutritional uptake system called the shiitake uptake system. And the plant can't absorb nutrients, and it just withers and shrivels up and dies. And they found that the gene that causes that death, they can manipulate that gene and turn it off. So now you can absorb all that poison and you don't have to die. So all the weeds die, but the food that we're going to eat stays alive with the poison on it. Then the farmers found out that because it dries up and withers things so good, that the wheat crop, we could spray the wheat crop instead of waiting 30 days and we could potentially lose it with a rainstorm. We could spray it, and in 3 to 5 days, we can harvest the whole crop because it's dried up and withered so hard. And now that glyphosate is present in our food. It's ubiquitous everywhere. Everybody's blood, and you can see how much. I had my blood tested. I think my hair tested. My numbers were low, but it's still there, no matter how much organic, because it's almost ubiquitous everywhere. Not a good chemical, and that's part of the problem. That goes into our compost system, into our large intestine, and the colonies. We don't want that stuff. It's not part of nature. Why are we messing with it? We could do it without this. We could farm just as much. Studies have shown, but now we're too far committed. The soils are already, there's a big movement. Dr. Zach Bush, who deals with a product that helps rebuild the gut microbiome. He's on the same page as I am. He helps farmers understand the soil, and then he helps them understand how gut health is the same, and we're all part of it all. And the solution to save the planet is to do the right agriculture and to take care of our ecology. And then once you're healthy, you become part of the solution instead of part of the problem, because you can't think straight because you're in dysbiosis.
Tom, is this video going to be on your website?
Yeah, we have a channel on YouTube, Singer Farm Naturals, and this one will be recorded. The one, I put one on there for the Western New York Herbal Conference as well, from August of this last year. That's on the cannabinoids, and we're going to keep all these recorded so people can reference them, go back to them and refer other people to them to help get a better understanding of how we are part of nature and the nature of things. And let's not complicate it. Let's simplify it. It's kind of neat because all these religions talk about faith, and we need to have faith in something that resides inside of us, that are these colonies that are capable of amazing things. I'm amazed on a daily basis at the miracle of the human body and the miracle of nature. And it's all we got to figure out is how to let nature do its thing. And it's not working the way we're doing it, drinking chlorinated water and eating fast foods and and glyphosate, in it, it's not working. But I'll tell you what does work is looking back on nature. When I grow something in soil that's alive, I can taste it, I can see it, I can feel it. And when I'm doing that to my human body, I can feel it. I'm full of life. I can't wait. I'm grateful every single moment because this is all a gift. The only thing that's real is the present moment. And I try to be in the present moment because I'm not thinking of the past and the future. I'm okay with the present moment, and I keep the colonies to keep my mind there.
Tom, I wanted to ask you about water. What is
Sure.
the best water to make coffee with?
The best water to make coffee?
Yeah,
Any kind of filtered water that takes that chlorine out. You'd be amazed how beautiful coffee tastes when you get the chlorine and the fluoride out of it.
I
Just
was
a good
using
carbon filter will take that out.
I was using distilled water, but then you said you seemed to kind of dismiss that.
Yeah, and also you're using distilled water, usually in a plastic jug. You know,
Yeah.
if you got a delivery system right at home, it goes right from your delivery system into your pot, and your clean water sources there, and they're not that expensive when you look at all of the inconvenience. And we're buying water that really isn't that pure anyway. And we're buying all these plastic bottles that have all of these estrogen. I can't think of them, but
PBAs.
yeah, BPA that just gets right into your system and messes with your environment and your human body. And it's, you know, so I know it's a dilemma because we like to have water. So you got to set yourself up, you know. So I got a mug that's like a stainless steel mug or glass mug that I use here, or stainless steel when I go on the road, or, you know, I'll drink, if I am going to drink water, I'll have a glass bottle that I drink out of. You know, I set myself up to plan for that. It's that important to me now. And at home, your food will taste amazing that way, just like, you know, growing your own food. There's nothing better.
Another question. How big of a role does gut health play into Graves' disease and mental health?
Which disease is that?
Graves' disease?
No, I'm not sure exactly what that disease is, but the way that I observe things is that everything has an origin in the gut, because that is the most vulnerable spot that we have, and that is the most misunderstood or underexplored because it's so new to us all. Mental health, there's not a doubt in my mind. I can tell you from my own point of view that, so I'll be 67 next month, and when I was 60 or 59, I had salmonella poisoning. I was 40 pounds heavier than I am today. My body ached a lot. My mind was clear, but I couldn't remember a lot of stuff. I was aging. And right now, I feel like I'm probably 30 or 40, and I run up the stairs and I exercise every day, and I'm busy from 6 a.m. till 10 o'clock at night, and I'm not tired. And I love what I do. And that's because I had to make a choice to change all this stuff. And people say, well, you know, you eat things that might not be enjoyable. I don't have to have food be my enjoyment. People are my enjoyment. Life is my enjoyment. Food is something that I need to keep the fuel to keep going. And yeah, I can enjoy it and I make it taste good, but it's not number one on the list like it used to be. Don't want to go too far over, so I want to try to keep it so we're good. Any other questions before we close out?
Quick suggestion, or what about the people that might be watching right now that can't afford to buy organic food, that can't afford to buy fresh food, that are relying on processed food? How can we help them?
Education, absolutely. Not a doubt in my mind. I can make a pot of greens and beans, or I can go over here and I've got all these organic beans, $2 to $3 a pound. You take a pound of dried beans and you soak them and then you cook them, and you end up having 2 or 3 pounds of beans. You end up having 6 or 7 or 8 servings, and you get creative and you have to learn, you know, we learned how to cook certain things because that's how the industrial society wanted us to buy things, you know. They even came out with TV dinners. So you had it brainwashed. This is what you get, 4 plots on there, and this is what's in each one. You know, and why do we do that? Because we were told that's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to get up and eat that biggest meal of the day. Guess what? It's not. You're better off to fast in the morning and get some fat in your body because you will have more energy and your gut microbes can finish doing their job and they're not going to take all the energy away from you. That's what I've learned. So I don't break my fast till probably 11 o'clock every morning. My body runs a hell of a lot better that way. But that's how I've learned the operating system of the human body. But beans, lentils, all of these things are not expensive. And we can teach people how to do this stuff because, you know, other countries do. You go down to Mexico and they're eating beans and rice and, you know, in the morning instead of the hash browns and the sausage. It's beans and rice in a lot of these countries. That's
Well, yes, I agree with you. Corn tortillas are probably their staple down there. Put a little beans with it, you've got a great meal. How are we going to teach people around here, especially in Niagara County? I mean, I live in Niagara County, you live in Niagara County. We have a lot of people in Niagara County that are not being able to respond to something that is very simple. How do we get to them? I mean, education is great. How are we going to educate them?
Yeah, doing things like this because word gets around. You know, I've had an amazing amount of parents that have come to me lately because they're really trying to find answers for their kids. And that was one of the things that prompted me to do this because there's nothing that makes me feel better than being able to take a child who's stressed out about stuff that they don't need to be and to be able to let them have their life back. And the parent as well, because then the parent gets their life back too. And their joy of their life is now enjoying their life. And it's not rocket science how we got off of this. We just don't have awareness. And now it's coming out, but everybody's too busy. I mean, most people are working 2 jobs, you know, husband and wife, working, kids in school. Who's got time to do research, you know? To work for people. I'm in a fortunate position. I just love
Good. Let's increase education.
education is where it's at, and we'll do that. You
Yep.
know, and the more places we do it, and the more that the word gets around, it's not expensive to make this food.
No, it's not rocket science either.
No, it's easy.
Common sense.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's about 300-year-old common sense.
Good.
I will talk to you later, Tom. Have a
All
good
right, Tom, good talking to you.
Same here. Hope everybody is well. Hope everybody learned something tonight.
I want
Thanks,
to know how to
everybody,
tie it
for taking
into
the time.
gardening.
Thank you, Tom.
My
Thank you.
pleasure. Thanks for taking time.
Is there a way to tie it into gardening?
Garden at your own success.